up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. We have a fantastic interview for you today. It's Ashton Jeanty. Yes, Next Pats, we're dipping into the draft, everybody. You better be ready for it. Ready or not, we're coming at you with prospects. We're going to be coming at you with all sorts of analysts, talking head types, draft nicks, to be laying as much draft intel on you as humanly possible between now and the spring. But what a get for us to be able to talk to Ashton Jeanty right off the bat here in mid-January before he really fully gets into the pre-draft process here, where you're talking pro days and combine and top 30 visits, all of that good stuff. And he was tremendous. Communication major, so maybe shouldn't be a surprise, but had a lot of fun talking to him about his journey at Boise State, which way he most enjoys making tacklers embarrass themselves, would-be tacklers, that is. I mean, the numbers for this guy are just off the charts. All-American, Heisman Trophy runner-up, damn near won the thing from Travis Hunter, who was excelling at two different positions. No small feat, but he's been that good. I mean, when you're talking about some of the most productive running backs in recent college football memory, he's right up there with the best of the best. And there was one very specific comp that he received recently from a friend of the podcast here, Louis Riddick, that we discuss as well. Interesting one for a guy who played his high school football very close to the Cowboys facility in Frisco, Texas. So that's a great conversation. You're really going to enjoy that. We're also going to be talking about a five-name wish list that I cooked up for the Patriots to attack this offseason. Is it the most realistic list in the world? No, that's why they call it a wish list, friends, okay? So I understand that. We understand that going into this exercise. But it is a fun exercise well before free agency begins, obviously well before the draft, well before any sorts of trades are going to be executed, to just give you a sense of just how many significant needs the Patriots have to fill this offseason. Obviously, it's a big number, okay? You know that. I know that. We're going to discuss it anyway. We're just going to hit on five names that I think take care of the biggest problems that the Patriots and Mike Vrabel and Ryan Cowden and Elliott Wolf have to solve this offseason. And listen, as pie in the sky my thinking may be when I lay these five names on you, the Patriots do have all kinds of resources to be able to address their problems. It's just a question of how many people are going to be willing to come to New England, even if New England is offering top-of-the-market kinds of salaries. We're also going to talk about the coordinator spots here in New England that are still left to fill. We haven't heard much, if anything, on the coordinator front since Mike Vrabel has taken over as head coach. Who are the names that should be in the mix, that might be in the mix, both at offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator? We'll be touching on that as well. But let's kick this thing off with our interview with Ashton Jeanty. Here he is. All right, there he is, Ashton Jeanty, one of the best players, regardless of position, in this year's NFL draft. Heisman finalist, Heisman runner-up. You know him by now. You've seen the highlights everywhere. Ashton, thank you so much for being with us here on the Next Pats podcast, man.
Thank you for having me.
I have to ask you first and foremost, our good friend of the podcast, Louis Riddick, former NFL player, former NFL executive. We love to have him on our podcast because he's so good at evaluating players. He was talking about you recently. He said that's Emmitt Smith with 4.344 speed. I have to ask you, knowing and understanding and respecting, I'm sure, Louis Riddick as you do, what does it mean to you to hear that kind of comparison?
Yeah, I mean, it means a lot, for sure. Emmitt Smith being a legend of the game, legend of the Cowboys, just a tremendously talented, player, but, to kind of compare me to him and then, add the part about, the speed, that's just awesome. And, I got a chance to, interview with him and talk to him and, love what he's about, love how he analyzes the game. And, he's a great guy.
Well, you, it's my understanding, grew up a Cowboys fan. You're from the area. You played at their practice facility, I think. It was your high school games. Is that right? So you're very well acquainted with what Emmitt Smith means, even if he's a little bit before your time. I don't know if you would remember necessarily him during his playing days, but is there anybody that you idolize? Maybe it was Emmitt Smith, but maybe there's somebody of a little different generation that you idolize. Can you tell us, Ashton, who maybe your biggest influence has been as a running back? Maybe somebody you tried to mold your style after.
Yeah, I think it's been a lot, honestly. For me, it's been Marshawn Lynch, Adrian Peterson, and then you talk about you know Reggie Bush, you know Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith. Like I watched all the greats and just try to take something from all their games, and they all were special in their own ways. So just trying to add all their things to my game. So hopefully I could be up there as one of the best too.
All special in their own right, all very different in terms of how they made people miss, Ashton. And that obviously was such a huge part of your game, was being able to create yards on your own, create yards after contact. And so, Marshawn Smith is running over people. Reggie Bush is juking people, spinning off of people. And we've seen you do it in every way, hurdling guys, right? Stiff arming guys. So I have to ask you, having as much experience as you do in this area, what would you say is your preferred method of embarrassing a potential tackler?
Oh, that's tough. I would say, I think from like just a mental standpoint, right, to have that mental advantage over your opponent is just running them over, like, because you do that and the crowd's like ooh, and it's they're just not gonna come. They're not gonna come and try to attack you the same after that, and then that's when really it sets you up to make a guy miss or stiff arm them because they're gonna hesitate. But I would definitely say running somebody over. But sometimes you feel it a little bit on the shoulders, man.
Yeah, you're absorbing a little bit of force there. There's no question about it. So it doesn't surprise me that you've got to be prepared for that yourself physically, regardless of how badly you may make a tackler miss. I want to dig into this just a little bit deeper, Ashton, because what's interesting to me is your contact balance is incredible, really, relative to other backs that we've watched over the years come out of the college ranks. And I just want to ask you, what goes into that? Meaning, do you have to see a hit coming to be able to bounce off of it the way that you do? Is there just a looseness? Obviously, you've got tremendous strength, but is there a looseness that you have to bring to the point of contact, to the line of scrimmage, in order to absorb those body blows as you do and keep moving? What do you think the key is for you? Is it just about, hey, I'm a powerful guy, I can squat X number of pounds, it doesn't matter. If you hit me in the wrong way, I'm just going to bounce off of it? Or do you have to see it coming up? I'm curious how you approach it and what you think the key is to being able to run the ball the way you do when it comes to bouncing off of those tackles.
Yeah. Well, to your point, I think it's a little bit of a few different things, right? So obviously the work you put in the weight room, that's a big deal on the football field, right? Being able to squat that much, right? That gives me a lot of power. And then, my change of direction, my speed also helps. So me being strong, running that fast, and then colliding with somebody, and I might be short, but I'm compact, and a lot of people don't realize in football that's an advantage, right? You talk to a lot of players, it's not always the 6'2" Derrick Henrys that they, or 6'4", whatever, the huge guys that they hate tackling. It's the smaller compact guys because they just bounce right off you. But also to me, I watch guys on film. I watch how they tackle, right? And even in the game, there's just certain positions you have to be in to bounce off somebody or make somebody miss. And it's kind of been like a feel thing over time that I've gotten better and better at each year.
Well, you're right. You don't have to be 6'2", 250 pounds to be able to run over people. That's clear. I mean, whether you're talking about Emmitt Smith or another name that you mentioned, Barry Sanders, you're chasing his records. in at the college level, and he
Yeah.
obviously was able to do it in a smaller frame, but was such a powerful guy, and his squat numbers were kind of legendary. I got to ask you, like, what are we talking when we're talking numbers here? What kind of poundage are we talking when you're talking about your squat? Is that your favorite lift, and what are we doing in the weight room these days, Ashton?
Yeah, I think squat is definitely one of my favorite lifts. I've always had a very strong lower body and upper body, honestly, too. But I love lifting. The weight room's a big part of being a football player, especially a running back. You got to stay strong and explosive. But I mean, squat. I did 605 this year. Did it pretty easy too. I had to test it out. My strength coaches, they didn't want me to do it, but I was like, hey man, I got to do it just this one time. But after that, I'm done, man. I'm out the big squatting game. Uh, I got to keep my knees good, got to keep that longevity, right? But yeah, I feel I could. I don't know. I think I could get up to at least like 750 pounds, but I don't need to just to take care of the body.
Listen, hey, there's a risk reward there, right? You gotta keep that machine humming the way you need it to be able to put yourself in the best position possible to have success at the next level. It's so fun talking to you about running over people, Ashton, because the way you start every play is so chill. And I know it takes people aback here when they're watching you on the biggest stage, New England, where we are, as you may know, it's not the biggest and most rabid college football fan base. And so when they see you towards the end of your career and they're watching the Heisman ceremony and they're seeing all your highlights and they see a guy who's basically standing upright in the backfield, I think people are wondering how does that start, Ashton? How did you take that approach when you first took it? And did you have coaches in your ear? We know how football coaches can be, especially at the lower levels at times. Hey, no, you need to do it this way, or the way that I've grown up doing it, or the way that it's been done for 50 years. So how did that start for you, and how does it maybe benefit you leading up to a given play?
Yeah, I've kind of always like just naturally wanted to stand like that in the backfield, but I'd always have coaches who were a little more old schools. Really in high school, like you got to stand like this. Your typical running back stance. But the running back coach that I've had for these past 2 years was like, just do whatever's comfortable, as long as you're fluid, efficient, no false steps, and you can stand however you want. And then I think for me, I already have a low center of gravity, so it doesn't take that much for me to, drop down as it does for a guy who's a little taller. And even then, some people might say I'm running a little higher than others are, but I'm just shorter, so I don't have to get down as much. And I think my 1,900 yards almost after contact speaks for that. And then I just feel when you get the ball in the backfield, right, you're hoping that a D lineman's not streaming through there, he's running right through. Sometimes it does happen, but when you get the ball first, I'm reading the play, right? I'm letting it develop, and then once it develops, then that's when I'm going to hit it, accelerate, and get down if I possibly need to. But the hope is that I can just run through there, full speed. But that doesn't happen every play.
Well, the contrast is great, right? I mean, you've got this guy who just he looks so relaxed, you look so at ease before the play starts, and then once you get the football, I mean, you're snatching souls, Ashton. So it's there's the yin and the yang there, which is really
Yeah.
fun to watch. The last thing I wanted to ask you before we get into your partnership with SAXX Underwear, which seems really cool, and obviously, let me just say, it takes a real confident man to be a SAXX Underwear or any underwear kind of spokesperson or model. So we're going to get to that. But you are on the precipice of a dream here, right, Ashton? And, for somebody who's had as much success as you, I think it is important to highlight to people that are listening to this or watching this, maybe even especially younger people, that it's not always easy for even somebody like you. And so I'm curious, was there ever a moment where you weren't sure this was going to happen the way it's about to happen for you, and for you to about to be somebody who's able to realize their dream? Can you tell us that moment if there was one?
Yeah, I think for me it was in my sophomore year. I think it was about week 7 or week 8. We're playing Wyoming, and I actually got hurt. got hit in the knee, sustained a knee injury, right? And, I was out for a few weeks, and we actually weren't doing too well. We had lost a game that we should have won, right? And your hopes and dreams of, going to the championship, being a conference championship, like that was gone, right? And then, rumors of my head coach being fired, and then, the transfer portal and all that, like coaches will be quick to be gone. The whole program will quick to be out of there, right? If they don't bring the right person in. So I really just, I call it dark days, I really didn't know what was going on. It felt dark, I couldn't see the light, but, I needed that. And sometimes a lot of players need that, you have that moment, but if you can come out of it, you can see the light, even in the darkness. That'll bring you to where you need to be. You just have to have faith in it.
Yeah, you had that moment, and then the rest is history. Yeah, you're staying at Boise, which I think surprised a lot of people, but you put together this storybook ending to your college career, and now you're about to be drafted, in my opinion, very highly in this coming NFL draft. Really looking forward to see how you handle the rest of the process, Ashton. Before we let you go, tell us about this partnership with SAXX. How did this come about?
Man, just thinking about it, I've been, making plays on the field and, changing the game, leaving it better than I found it. But, SAXX on the underwear side, they're doing the same thing, changing the game, making better quality underwear, than the rest. And, I just wanted to be a part of that. And, shout out to Max Crosby, as bringing me in as another ambassador, watching him doing what he does and, obviously modeling too, gave me all the more, confidence. And, I've been rocking them for the past few months. They're super comfortable. You know what I'm saying? I wore them at the Heisman ceremony. I'm wearing some right now. I keep some SAXX on me.
You have to. And listen, I would imagine you're going to be wearing some on draft night as well. I mean, listen, you've established this relationship with SAXX. They got to be close to you in all these important moments in your life now moving forward.
Yeah, most definitely. It's been a great partnership, so we got to keep that going.
There you go. Well, Ashton Jeanty, thank you so much for spending some time with us here on Next Pats, man. Great to hear more about your story, about your approach to your position, and we wish you the best of luck. It'll be an exciting few months to track you as we get to the combine and to draft day itself and everything that comes with that. Enjoy the process, and we can't wait to see where you end up in the spring, man.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Great stuff from Ashton there. Be really interesting to see where he ends up in the draft. I feel right now, even though he plays a position where teams are generally speaking reluctant to draft that position top 5, top 10. You just don't see that all that often anymore. I think this might be the perfect draft for Jeanty to be thrust into because the pool of blue chip players in this year's class is really just not all that deep. And so even though positional value being what it is, even though the running back spot, despite running becoming a more important part of the game, despite teams really focusing in on taking away the explosive pass and in some ways opening themselves up to be hit and impacted and affected by opposing running games, even though we know that is the reality of the NFL in 2024 and 2025, running backs still, in my opinion, because they are somewhat, quote-unquote, replaceable relative to other positions, you're still not going to see these guys get taken at the top of the draft. But this draft in particular, there just ain't that many elite-level talents across the board. And so if you feel like you can get one, whether it's a running back or a guard or a tight end, you might have to take that guy early. And with Jeanty, given his, I would say, rare skill set to be able to run through tackles, and I know people will look at his production and look at over 6.5 yards per carry against non power conference opponents, he was still over 5 yards per carry against some of the best competition that he faced this year, over 100 yards per game on the ground. And so between what he can do as a runner, what he can do in pass protection, and he is a willing pass protector, what he can do as a receiver where it looks like he has really natural hands, that's somebody that I wouldn't be quick to pass on, especially when you get to talk to him for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, as we were lucky enough to be able to do. And you get to know him a little bit as a player and how he communicates and the things that matter to him. I think teams are really going to fall in love with this guy, and they're going to look at the rest of the class and say, are we really going to take a risk on player X, having no idea how he's going to translate to the next level, when we could look at an Ashton Jeanty and know we can plug and play with that guy, and he's going to give us real production, and he's going to give us yards after contact. That guy's built like a fire hydrant, and he is quick, and he is fast, and he is athletic, and boy, you get somebody like Louis Riddick comparing him to Emmitt Smith. I do not take that lightly at all, because Louis is not prone to hyperbole. And so as hyperbolic as that comparison may sound, you know he means it. And so for me, will he go as high as even somebody like Jahmyr Gibbs a few years ago with 12 overall and surprised a lot of people when Detroit took him? Would anyone say right now that that was a bad investment? And these are two different types of players, don't get me wrong, but you're talking about that running back position. And if you've just got a thing against the position, then maybe your team will be out on him. But I think teams are going to be a little bit more open to that spot, again, because of this draft class and because of, in some ways, the way the game is going. All right, it's time now for my 5-name wish list. And if you watched Early Edition earlier this week, you caught a glimpse of this already, but I did just want to mention it here because I think it's fun. Again, it's a fun exercise. And for all of our friends watching on YouTube right now, give me your 5-name wish list in the comments section. Let's get that thing cranking because I want to hear the players that you're interested in right now, especially when it comes to the draft. We're going to be very familiar with a lot of the names that are thrown around for the 4th overall pick because there just aren't that, again, especially in this draft class, there just ain't that many that are worthy of that draft spot. So the one draft pick that I have on my list of 5 names, you're going to know. 3 of the veterans that are on this list, you're going to know. 1 you might not, but you might if you're a longtime follower of this podcast, because he was a prototypical Patriot back in the day. We'll get to that in a moment. Here are the 5 names. We're going to start off with the biggest one of them all. It's T. Higgins. Free agent, Cincinnati Bengals. Does he even get out of Cincinnati? Mike Petraglia covers the Bengals like nobody else. Says, I wouldn't be so sure about that. They may be going with that Dolphins model. They may be going with that Eagles model. You may not be able to pry him from Joe Burrow. And that may be the case. But the closer we get to free agency, it feels like to me, the better the odds that T. Higgins ends up testing the waters and figuring out what his market is and letting the Bengals know, if you're not willing to pay me something insane, I'm going to go and find something insane somewhere else. And in my opinion, the Patriots should be willing to give him something insane. And that's me not even knowing if he's a true number 1. I just feel as though he has the potential to be. I think he could be in a situation where he's not overshadowed by Jamar Chase. Some of the work he's been able to do, both with Chase and without. The numbers without Jamar Chase, and it's not a huge sample, but they're damn good. And for him to finish the season the way that he was able to finish it, that closing kick was about as strong a statement as you could ever hope to make as a player about to be headed to free agency. So I think there's a good chance he gets there. I don't know if he will. I think there's a good chance he gets to free agency. And I think the Patriots should essentially offer him the moon. Because when you're talking about trades and giving away future first-round picks for somebody like DK Metcalf or trying to figure out a way to blow the Eagles out of the water and get A.J. Brown here, T. Higgins, all it is money, baby. All it is money. So that's the name that you start with, and that is a premium position, glaring need, check and check. Off the board, just like that. I'm not saying don't stop adding at receiver. By no means do I mean that. But you at least have it addressed now. And you have someone that you feel like can be your number 1. Even if he's not league-wide necessarily a true number 1. He's that outside the numbers, down the field threat that you need, who can threaten an explosive play. We know Vrabel's in on these X plays, quote unquote. Do your Dante Hall with me as we say it. X plays. that guy's an X-play machine. And no, I won't be saying that for the foreseeable future, but let's get them all out of the way while we still can. Name number 2 on the list, Ronnie Stanley, another AFC North guy. Now, not as firmly in his prime as T. Higgins. He's 31 years old, closer to the end than the beginning. I've asked around the league a little bit about his level of play and where he's at this point. He's not what he used to be. That's okay, especially for the Patriots, because they just need someone who can man that left side and man it comfortably and understand that you're going to get a representative level. He certainly could do that. He is still more than capable of doing that. Is he the elite level all-pro left tackle that every team wants? Probably not at this point. Can you get him out of Baltimore after he spent his entire career there? I'm not so sure. High-end tackles, even ones that are on the decline, very rarely even get to free agency. And Baltimore, as we know, they've got an argument as the best team in football right now. They're pushing for championships. Are they suddenly going to want to let their left tackle go to free agency? I'm not so sure. But again, pie in the sky, for the sake of the exercise, this is the kind of player the Patriots need. Get that thing taken care of as best as you can, the tackle spot. Both sides, left and right. Get it taken care of so that when you get to the draft, you don't have to force Will Campbell at 4 overall. That to me, and we still got a long way to go, maybe eventually I will say, yes, hell yes, Will Campbell, worthy of that number 4 overall pick. Right now, I think there are too many questions, and I would not force it. As glaring as your need is there, I would not force it in the draft because that's how you run into mistakes. And so if you can do something, anything, in free agency, via trade, to make sure that you're not backed into the corner and forced to take a tackle when draft weekend rolls around, that to me is the ideal way to play it. So I have Ronnie Stanley there as my second name on my list of 5. Third name, another premium position, Josh Sweat from the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I'm a little bit biased when it comes to Josh Sweat because I kid you not, the man was practically unblockable in training camp practices against the Patriots this summer. We know the reason why that was. Okay? We told you then on this podcast and others. However many months later, we can tell you now with confidence, the Patriots' offensive line was abhorrent in 2024. And I'm not sure it ever looked worse than it did during that week of practice against the Eagles. And I know soon thereafter we heard from Elliott Wolf, no, we actually kind of like the way some of those guys play, especially in the run game. Jerod Mayo, same sort of message. I remember that being sort of the company line around that time. But what we saw in that joint practice against the Eagles was about what they were during the regular season, which was not good. Josh Sweat, though, pretty good. 16 games in 2024, 8 sacks. He had 11 sacks 2 seasons ago in 2022, 7.5 the year before that, 2021. He made the Pro Bowl. This guy is a physical freak. He is an athletic marvel. He was coming out of Florida State years ago. He's 6'5", 265. To me, if you're Mike Vrabel and you might want to lean towards those 3-4 packages where, how commonly is anyone running true 7-man fronts these days? It's not often. But that style of defense, you're going to put this guy at one of your outside linebacker spots and feel really, really good about it. And you add him to a group that includes Anthony Jennings, especially on early downs. That includes Keon White. And maybe you can get more out of Keon White than you've gotten out of him before because he's now working with Mike Vrabel, who got so much out of Whitney Merciless and got so much out of Jadeveon Clowney, who's obviously a physical freak in his own right and, an athletic marvel in his own right and a very high draft pick. But he needed a lot of work. And Vrabel, according to our conversation with Josh Palmer last week here on this podcast, was really the one who was credited with getting Clowney's career going in such a way where now every year he's on a different team, but teams keep giving him opportunities because he knows what he's doing out there on the edge. So can you get Josh Sweat in here, add him to that mix, and feel like you've really upgraded your pass rush? That to me is something that the Patriots are definitely going to have to do one way or another. Josh Sweat, he's going to be one of the best and most highly paid free agents in this year's free agent class. And those three names that I just rattled off, you're talking big time guaranteed dollars between the three of them if you're able to pull this off. And when I say big time, I mean, boy, I don't know. You're talking 130, 140, maybe more. Is that possible? $1 million guaranteed between Higgins, Stanley, and Sweat if you can get them all. So let's be reasonable about this, I guess. Let's take just a quick second, be reasonable for a quick second, and say, what are the odds that they're able to actually pull this off? That they want to actually pull this off? I wouldn't say they're all that high. But again, for the sake of the exercise, these are the names that we should be watching. And this is the kind of approach that the Patriots should be shooting for, in my opinion. It's what every team should be shooting for. Get those glaring needs taken care of, and then fill out the rest of your roster in the draft. But be freed up in the draft to take the best player available. What you don't want is what the Patriots had this past year in the draft. Well, we got our quarterback. Okay, well, now we need a receiver. Who's the best receiver left? Okay, well, now we still need a tackle. We're not sure about Chukwuekorfor. We're not sure about Vidarian Lowe. Michael Wenu, we think, is going to be the guy at right tackle. Turns out he's not. Turns out he's a guard. Let's force it at tackle, and let's draft a guy who we think could play left tackle, even though he never played left tackle in college, which is mind-numbing now when you go back and think about it, because that's not an easy transition for a lot of guys. And I think it would have been really hard to feel certain that you felt good about his chances of playing left tackle based on what he showed in college. Or even, maybe you watched him during his pro day, or you brought him in for a workout, and I don't know what their background was in terms of who they spoke to get a sense for Wallace's ability to play on the left side. In some ways, boy, this is a spin zone comment here, but in some ways, are they fortunate that Onwenu had to kick into guard? No, I'm not going to go that strongly there, but in terms of Wallace's transition to the NFL, he's lucky Mike Onwenu ain't at right tackle anymore. Because they were looking for a left tackle. They might have tried to force that square peg into that round hole. And then who knows what his career looks like. We still don't know what his career is going to look like. But at least now he'll have an opportunity to play a position that he's comfortable with if he's their best option available. Which brings us to our next name. SAXX Tom. Tackle out of Green Bay. This guy was a prototypical Patriot all the way back in 2022, played a variety of positions. He was viewed as this uber versatile, uber athletic offensive lineman coming out of Wake Forest. Some of his advanced numbers were just off the charts. And with Bill Belichick, obviously still running things in 2022, and understanding that he valued versatility maybe more than anyone across positions, you would have thought that he would have seen someone like SAXX Tom and said, oh, that's a guy that'd be worth an early day 2 pick. Instead, he lasts all the way to the 4th round, and he gets taken by the Packers with the 140th overall pick. Let's go through some of the names that the Patriots drafted in that year's class ahead of the 140th overall pick. Brace yourselves. Cole Strange, 29 overall. Tyquan Thornton, 50 overall. Marcus Jones, 85 overall. Jack Jones, 121 overall. Pierre Strong, 127 overall. And Bailey Zappi, 137 overall. Oh boy. 1, 2, 3, 4 of those names no longer with the club. All taken before SAXX Tom. This is your chance to right a wrong, New England Patriots. And the reason I have him on the list isn't because he's a free agent and he's available. He ain't. So you're going to have to trade for him. He's scheduled to be a free agent not this offseason, but next. And so is that somebody who has proven to be a starting caliber, better than average offensive tackle in this league? Can you pluck him from Green Bay? Again, maybe you're not able to. The same way you might not be able to get Higgins out of Cincinnati and Stanley out of Baltimore. or Sweat out of Philly for that matter. Who knows what they have planned for him. But this is the kind of player that I would be targeting and willing to give big money to after you've targeted him via trade, because you're not going to bring him in as a rental for 1 year and then say, see you later, and hope to get a third-round comp pick a couple off seasons from now. No. You'd be bringing him aboard. You would be saying, we think you are just scratching the surface in terms of your high-end potential, and we're taking you to New England, and we're going to pay you like a well above average player to get you to stick around, and we're going to have that right tackle spot taken care of for the foreseeable future. Then we've got Ronnie Stanley at left tackle, and we got our bookend tackles. We've got Layden Robinson, maybe. Don't put that one in pen, but maybe you've got Layden Robinson at left guard, David Andrews and or Cole Strange at center, Micah Wenu at right guard, and you've got now a representative unit where you could do a lot of different things. Stanley's been in an offense where they've had a pretty versatile and downhill running scheme for a long time. You've got, athletic guys in Andrews and Strange at center. Strange certainly, if he can get back to being fully healthy and trusting that knee. Then at guard, Layden Robinson and Michael Winter, those are maulers. And so maybe you're going to be more of a downhill team, but Zach Tom can give you a little bit of everything. And he's still a really good athlete. He's played guard at the NFL level. He's played a tiny bit of center. But he's one of these guys that you could, in theory, use just about anywhere, which, to me, has tremendous value. Last name on the list of 5, pick number 4 overall, the Patriots select Abdul Carter out of Penn State. Now, maybe you're looking at this and you're saying, well, you just had him signing Josh Sweat for big money. Yep. Did you watch the Patriots rush the passer last year? It wasn't pretty. And maybe you're hoping Keon White explodes into something that he hasn't been in year 3. I'm not sure you're banking on that necessarily. And if you are, if Mike Vrabel is, great. Then maybe you move out of that 4th overall spot. But I'm anticipating 2 quarterbacks and Travis Hunter. That's just where we are right now. But say it's 2 quarterbacks and Travis Hunter, 1 through 3, pick number 4 overall. In my opinion, take one of the very few true blue chip players in this year's draft class at a premium position and sprinkle them into that mix. Now you've got Josh Sweat, Keon White, maybe Abdul Carter in year 1, even with the 4th overall pick. I would get it if people didn't love this, but you might need to give them some time to add a little strength, maybe to pick up a little bit more size. And maybe you feel like that's going to come with time. But in the meantime, you're using him as a sub-package kind of player. Not as seldomly as you use Josh Uche in years past. I mean, he was really a niche and role-specific kind of guy that they just did not want to have on the field all that often. 4th overall pick, you got to use more than that. But how many passing situations are you going to see across the board? 2 minutes, 2nd and long, 3rd and long. Yes, get him out there. But that's a formidable group. And that's a group that should only help a secondary that, while it features Christian Gonzalez, might have some other holes that you don't feel great about in the passing game. But if you can affect the quarterback, we talked about this on the Patriots Talk podcast the other day. AFFECT, affect the quarterback. If you can do that with Sweat and Carter and Keon White, Christian Barmore, you're hoping, is coming back and is going to be able to play and be healthy. We'll see with him. But now you're talking about a unit that could potentially carry a defense. Never mind represent an improved unit over an abysmal 2024 group. That's a game-changing kind of group with Carter in that mix there, and I think he should be in serious consideration. For that 4th overall pick, because in my opinion, do not force it there. Do not force it there. Even if you're not able to get Ronnie Stanley at left tackle in free agency. Again, maybe I'll feel differently about it once we get closer to the draft. I'm reserving the right to change my opinion. But right now, if you could get a high-end player at a premium position that you feel really strongly about, that should be the move for a team that has myriad holes right now. Not picking a tackle and hoping he's a franchise guy because that's really your most glaring need. That's your biggest issue on the roster right now. I get it. But you can't be swinging and missing in the top 5. So you better feel really good about Kelvin Banks or Will Campbell if that's the direction you want to go. And again, maybe we'll feel that way when the time comes. But right now, those are your 5 names. Higgins, Stanley, Sweat in free agency. Get ready to make it rain. Burn some cash. Get ready for that. Then you're trading for Zach Tom with Green Bay, and then you're drafting Abdul Carter. There are your 5 names. All right, let's talk coordinators really quickly because, again, there hasn't been much news on that front. Maybe by the time you listen to this podcast, there will be. Defensive coordinator, what are they looking at? What are you looking at? What should you be looking at this weekend? We very rarely talk about the defensive side, and I think with good reason. Mike Vrabel's a defensive-minded head coach. He's going to have some assistants that he trusts, people that would be on his list for that all-important job. Let's be serious. Let's call it what it is. It is still a critical role, even if Vrabel's a defensive guy, because he's supposed to be Vrabel. He's supposed to be your CEO head coach, even with the defensive background. You don't want him having to focus on the down-to-down decisions and every little minute play call on that side of the ball as he gets his career started here in New England. Keep the name Bobby King in mind from Philadelphia. Inside linebackers coach, worked for Vrabel a couple years in Tennessee. Before that, the 2 overlapped in Houston. So long-standing background with Bobby King. That is a transition. Inside linebackers for the Eagles now, that is a transition that you do often see. That's sort of viewed as kind of the step away from being your play-calling defensive coordinator, coaching that inside linebacker spot because of the guys that you're coaching up on a daily basis. Those are the guys that are often calling the defense, which I think gets a little overrated sometimes. But if you're coaching inside linebackers, you have to know what's going on with the pass rush. You have to know what's going on with the front, all the different run fits. But you also have to know what's going on in the pass game. You're the linchpin position in a lot of ways that connects the defense. And so that would be a name that would make a lot of sense. Let's keep an eye on that one. Let's watch the Eagles this weekend as they take on the LA Rams, and let's see how that linebacker group develops. But when you're talking about some of the players that he would have coached here in 2024, Nakobe Dean, Zach Bond, who's now an all-pro level linebacker, his 1-year track record in Philadelphia is pretty good. So that would be one name I would keep an eye on. Then when it comes to offensive coordinator, I find this conversation so interesting because getting into Vrabel's head is something we're still not accustomed to doing, right? Is he going to go with somebody he has a relationship with, but a person who might actually have a stronger relationship with ownership? And is he going to go with that person if they're a former head coach? Is there any world in which Mike Vrabel would feel as though his authority is undermined by bringing in a former head coach, 2-time head coach, somebody who has a lot of experience here in New England, who would have major backing from the fans here in New England? Is that something you want to invite into your operation if you're Mike Vrabel? And obviously the name we're talking about is Josh McDaniels. And I think he should be at least near, if not at the top of the list of offensive coordinator candidates for the Patriots, just because I feel as though, I know people might argue this, but I feel as though his track record is his track record when it comes to working with young quarterbacks, whether it's Matt Castle or Jimmy Garoppolo. And listen, I have not been Jimmy Garoppolo's biggest fan, but I think the fact that you got as much for him as you did, that you saw from him what you saw from him in 6 quarters of regular season play in New England, and you saw a brief but bright flash from Garoppolo in that very quarterback-friendly system with Kyle Shanahan helping that team get to a Super Bowl. You don't give all the credit to Josh McDaniels, but he has to get some. From Eastern Illinois to the Super Bowl, yeah, Kyle Shanahan gets some too, and Jimmy Garoppolo gets some too. But that was a guy who needed developing and who clearly got enough to be part of one of the best offenses in football when he was there. Jacoby Brissett. I think Josh McDaniels gets a little credit for Jacoby Brissett. Developed him to the point as a 3rd-round pick where he showed enough in preseason and in an emergency situation in his rookie season to eventually be traded away for a contributing player. They ended up getting Philip Dorsett, who was a disappointment in Indy, but ended up playing a lot of football here in New England, and obviously has had a long career in the league as a backup level player. But I give Josh McDaniels a little credit for that. I give Josh McDaniels credit for Mac Jones. So his track record is what it is. You're going to argue it if you're not a fan of Josh McDaniels, and that's fine. But he's also an experienced play caller, which I think would have major value. Just allowing Mike Vrabel to not have to worry about the offense. We've heard that term, head coach of the offense. We heard it with Alex Van Pelt and Gerard Mayo here this past year. You're hoping for better results, clearly, but that's how you could handle it if you're Vrabel. I got enough going on here. We're trying to build a roster. I'm trying to take this team over. I'm trying to figure out who my guys are and who they aren't. I'm trying to figure out who's going to be with me for the long haul, when it comes to the people in that locker room. And I got enough on my plate. I don't need to be holding the hand of a first-time play caller on the offensive side and looking over his shoulder and making sure he has everything he needs. It might be nice to just be able to get away from that for an extended period of time as I get myself settled and I try to get this team settled under me. I think there'd be huge value in bringing in Josh McDaniels. But there are other options, and there should be. In my opinion, they should go through a long list. It should be a thorough search. That job's that important. So there's your experienced name. There's your familiar name, especially when it comes to ownership. Who's your familiar name when it comes to Vrabel, though? Who's his guy when it comes to that offensive coordinator position? It might be Tim Kelly. Tim Kelly had extensive experience in Houston when Vrabel was there. Then he remained in Houston, so in the division, while Vrabel was taking over in Tennessee. But then he eventually joined Vrabel in 2022 as the pass game coordinator, and then in 2023, Vrabel's final year there, he was the offensive coordinator. Would Vrabel be loyal enough to Tim Kelly to say, hey man, I got my opportunity. I'm back in the head coaching saddle, and you're my guy. I know things didn't go the way we wanted them in 2023. We were dealing with all sorts of issues. The roster was blowing up on us. Injuries really derailed the season prior. We didn't have the kind of quarterback play we needed for your offense to get off the ground, but I'm a loyal guy. I care about my people. I care about elevating them, the people that have been loyal to me over the years. And so you're tight ends coach in New York right now with the Giants, Tim Kelly, and I want to bring you to New England. Just a couple 100 miles north, pop up this way, and let's get this thing rolling. You're my guy. Is that how he would handle it? Because I could see it that way. So you've got the guy who's familiar to the region and to ownership and to the head coach too, but then you have maybe a little bit closer connection with somebody like Tim Kelly because they've coached together, because they've worked in that respect already, and maybe they would want to keep it going, or maybe Vrabel specifically would want to elevate somebody who has in his mind been loyal to him in the past. And so I wonder if it could go that way. So you've got your familiar with the head coach person. And then you have the person who might just get to the interview and blow people away. And I think there could be a number of people involved who would fit that criteria, whether it's Josh McCown coming from Minnesota. Obviously, you've got a play-calling head coach there. He's the quarterback's coach there in Minnesota right now, so he's still a few steps away from ever calling plays, if that job even ever comes open under Kevin O'Connell. Maybe he would be interested in coming to New England and interviewing to be the offensive coordinator, although he's getting head coach looks, it sounds like, from the Jets. And so that's an option. Nick Caley, another name that should be familiar to you if you're listening to this podcast. Somebody the Patriots wanted to bring in as offensive coordinator last year. He turned down the job. Well, the job looks a lot different right now. Drake May can play. The head coach is going to get some runway. This is an experienced guy. This guy was coach of the year in 2021. He's got a great relationship with ownership. I know Mayo did too. But they're not going to be changing head coaches again next offseason. In all likelihood. I guess you never say never. 4 coaches in 4 years. Could you imagine? So the job looks a little different. Now, Caley doesn't have that crossover experience with Vrabel. He's never been on that staff. And he doesn't have the play calling experience of somebody like McDaniels. But is he one of those younger offensive minds? He's coming from the McVay system right now. He'd have Sean McVay's stamp of approval. He, I think, has some McVay in him in terms of his approach to the job. High energy guys, communicate well with players. Hunter Henry was singing Nick Caley's praises. It feels like just a few weeks ago. It's when the Rams were back here in Foxborough, and they ended up beating the Patriots. But before that game, Hunter Henry couldn't have had more nice things to say about Nick Caley, who was the tight ends coach here when Hunter Henry arrived. So there are a multitude of options for Vrabel. It's just hard for us to get a good gauge on what is he going to value most. Is he going to value the guy that ownership says, hey, we really would love to have this guy? And you obviously know Josh, and he's got experience, and it makes too much sense. Let's just go ahead and get this thing done. Or does he want somebody who's worked with him in the past? Or does he want to go off the board and take someone else? That, to me, is among the most, if not the most, interesting storyline when it comes to the Patriots in the here and now. Maybe outside of my personal 5-man wish list for the Patriots this offseason. Just saying. I know that's just as concerning to you as who the Patriots name to be their offensive play caller and Drake May's coach, the guy who's ushering Drake May into the next phase of his career. I know. My 5-man wish list is just as important as all that stuff is to you. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the Next Pats podcast. Thanks so much for listening, guys. If you could, please, it would make my week. If you would rate, comment, subscribe if you haven't already on Apple Podcasts. If you're on YouTube, thank you so much. We love our YouTube family. The comment section, unbelievably active over the course of the last few weeks, and we thank you for that. Let's make it so again this week, shall we? Hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, get in the comments. Let's mix it up there. I'll be mixing it up there as well. Let's get some of those 5-man wish lists of your own. I want to see them. Show me some names that maybe I wasn't considering strongly enough for this particular episode. Maybe we'll get to some more in next week's episode. We have plenty more to get to when it comes to who's joining this coaching staff, who's joining this team, where are Patriots players that are already on the roster maybe going to end up if they're not going to be here in New England. Sounds like there could be a lot of roster turnover based on some of the things Mike Vrabel's said in the first couple of days as head coach here in New England. So there will be plenty to talk about, as there always is. So keep it here, locked on the Next Pats podcast. We'll talk to you next time.